from the back.
I've seen him once. He's so tall.
Yeah. All right, we're going to get started this afternoon with Justice of the Peace Department 6. Judge Bita Yeager is present. Her opponent is canceled and is not going to appear today. Apparently that was what Steve talked about earlier. They're going to be family commitment. So at this time, what we'd like to do, you judge, is tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll start the questioning with Melanie and go from there. Thank you. Please lower your voices so we can hear the judge.
So I'm Judge Bita Yeager. I've been an attorney here in town for over 20 years. I've lived in Las Vegas for 22 years. I first clerked for 3 different district court judges, and after that I was a public defender for 18 and a half years. During the last 4 to 5 years of that time, I was a team chief. So I oversaw 7 other attorneys along with a social worker, investigator, a secretary, and a clerk. And while I was in the public defender's office, I advocated to take a more holistic approach towards the clients. I represented many veterans while I was there. I also handled for about 4 years the competency and mental health court for our entire office. That was in addition to my regular duties and my regular caseload. So I'm very familiar with the unique challenges that veterans face when you're talking about TBI and mental illness and PTSD. I also advocated, I brought our blue sheet, which for those of you who are not familiar with the Justice Court, when a person is charged with a crime and they can't afford an attorney, they have to fill out a blue sheet which gives the public defender information about that person. Before, it just used to have the name of the person and just very basic information. And I advocated about 5 or 6 years ago that we needed to get more information, including if they were a veteran, if they were honorably discharged, so that way we could link them to services immediately through our social worker. Also, I wanted to make sure that we knew about if they had any mental health issues, what their residence situation is, if they're homeless or not. So that way we could take in more information about them at the very beginning. I also started the North Las Vegas Community Court, which addresses 18 and 25-year-old nonviolent offenders. It took about a year to plan it, and it was a cross-sector partnership between the Public Defender's Office, the District Attorney's Office, the police, and Nevada partners and other service providers. And what we did is that we figured out who we thought would be appropriate, as who would be the ideal candidate, which we determined to be the 18 and 25-year-old nonviolent offenders. And it was an opt-in program where it was a year-long program where they would get linked to services and also learn job training and other skills, so that once they graduated at the very end, that they would be full-time employed, and to combat recidivism, they wouldn't return back to the justice system again. We've had 2 graduating classes so far, and no one has returned back to the justice system. In addition, I also started a collaboration with Legal Aid of Southern Nevada and Nevada Legal Services and the Boyd School of Law in teaching a record sealing class, because it's a very complicated kind of process, and for those people who couldn't afford an attorney, it was very difficult for them to be able to do that. So we started that, and to date, I think 1,200 people have gone through that class. So I have been sitting now for almost a year in the Justice Court as a judge, and I have a completely civil calendar right now. So I do landlord-tenant summary evictions, disputes that are 10,000 and under, default judgments, and those kinds of things. I'm currently working on getting a partnership together on Las Vegas Community Court, which would link people to services as well. I've been talking to Metro Convention Center Area Command. I know that they've been doing the homeless outreach every week, and they utilize the veteran services to identify those homeless veterans and link them to services. I can tell you that in my summary eviction court, if I have someone who's in front of me that is a veteran, I actually asked JoAnne, who is our Veterans Court Coordinator, to come down and sit with them so that she can talk about what services that they can access, so that way they have somewhere to go. I have participated throughout the years, almost every year, at the homeless stand down, where I also see a lot of veterans and have advocated on their behalf. So that sets it up.
Melanie, we'll start with you because we missed some of the panel. So, Judge, because we have such a large panel, we're going to try to keep answers down to original 1 minute because there's such a variety of people. And it's just you, so you'll have plenty of opportunity to be heard.
Melanie Thomas. I just wanted to thank you for coming here today. It's really clear to me that you care about veterans or you wouldn't be here. Obviously, when you appeared on Veterans in Politics in the last year, I was part of interviewing you, and the discussion got a little bit heated and defensive on all sides around, and even after that, for you to come here and seek this endorsement really speaks volumes to me about your character, and I think that's a difficult thing to do, and I really admire it, and I talked to Steve about it before you came here, that I just thought that was a really great thing for you to do, and I'm glad you're here.
Well, thank you, Ms. Thomas. I really appreciate that.
So with that being said, and having had the opportunity to speak with you before, I would ask today, what sets you apart from your challenger, and what do you plan on implementing if you are retained that you haven't been able to do in the last year?
Well, what sets me apart from actually both my challengers, because I have two, is my experience. I actually have more years of experience and have done more jury trials than both of them combined. So I am very familiar with justice court. I appeared in justice court for 18 and a half years, almost every day. And I can tell you that I have also a depth of knowledge in the justice system, if you're talking about the different problems that we have in the justice system, such as mental health issues, homelessness issues. I've always advocated that everyone should be treated fairly by the justice system, and that is what I continue to do. What I've been trying to do in my civil docket is to make sure, because I can tell you for summary evictions, it's emotionally very difficult. Because the law is very narrow as far as what you can do. And so oftentimes you'll see people in front of you that just can't pay the rent because they've lost a job, they've had a health issue that's set them back. So what I've been trying to do and continue to work on is to try and get coordinated information for each one of those people that are getting evicted, because I know that there are different services that are available to veterans as opposed to someone who may be a victim of domestic violence, as opposed to a mother with children. But there's not really a good coordination as far as providing that information. And so that way, when someone is getting evicted, I at least can direct them to services both temporary and long-term. You know, if you're talking about a temporary shelter, but then also food pantries and the like, I think that that's much needed in our community. Also, I mentioned before that I'm working on the Las Vegas community court. And just in case some of you aren't familiar with the community court model, it is a model which holds the participant responsible and accountable for their actions, but also addresses the driver of the crime. If it's homelessness, substance abuse, that kind of thing, it links them to the services, so that way you're looking at more long-term addressing those issues, so the recidivism rate goes down. It's been happening in for over 20 years. Midtown Community Court in New York was the first one, and their recidivism rate is much lower than traditional courts, and also their compliance rate is much higher. So that's what I'm working on.
Or Jason?
Yeah, it's kind of, Jason Stoppel, this is a fair question. Your last name is different today than it was a year ago. I just didn't know why. I couldn't find anything. My question basically is, how are you concerned about voter and name recognition if they don't know your name compared to when you were on the ballot the first time when you got this seat, and your last name is different present day?
Well, I wasn't actually on the ballot the first time. I was actually selected through, since Judge Kephart had gone up to district court, there was an open seat, so I actually went through a whole vetting process, which I was selected over 19 other candidates. and I was selected by the Clark County Commissioners. So a couple of years ago, I got married to my husband, Steve Yeager, and I hadn't gone through the going to the driver's license and getting all those things changed. And it was apparent to me when I'm in a position where I'm meeting people that they had no idea that we were married. So I just decided I was just going to change my name, and whether that confuses the voters, that that I'm still the same person. I think that those in the legal community who know me as a hardworking and a prepared individual. Whether my name is Kamsi or Yeager, I'm still Bita, I'm still the same person. So.
Can you tell us your thoughts on the Veterans Court?
As far as whether or not we should have it, or
Yeah, there's been some recent controversy about possibly canceling it.
Right. Well, here's how I feel. I think that veterans are an underserved community, and we should be doing all that we can to increase the access to Veterans Court. And I think certainly 2 or 3 or more Veterans Court are better than just one in District Court. So I myself have advocated on behalf of many clients for both District Court and Justice Court, Veterans Court services. And I think that it's very important that, veterans are different because they have an opportunity to get linked to services that aren't available to other people because there are veterans. And they also suffer unique challenges because of what they go through in combat. The traumatic brain injury, the PTSD, increased mental illness because of that. And so I think there are a unique population that we should be taking care of because they have taken care of us. So my thoughts are that if there is a gap in the statute, that we should be doing everything we can in the next legislative session to fill that gap. So that way we can have the Veterans Court and Justice Court and Municipal Court as well.
Thank you.
I'm Jeff Attar. So my question is, about 6 months ago they did a poll. I think it was a Rasmussen poll. About 50%, I don't know the exact number, but they basically said, the American people said they would vote for whoever is the opposite of the incumbent.
Whoever is what?
Whoever is the opposite of the incumbent,
Okay.
they would vote for that person, regardless of office, party, anything. Whoever's not in power basically gets the vote. Over half the population polled. So here's my question. Given this current kind of anti-establishment, anti-government, whoever's in power sentiment that society has now, what would you say to those people who are saying, well, I don't really like who's in power, but why should I vote for you? I'll give you a shot. Basically, what would you say to them to change their mind versus not vote for lesser two evils, so to speak, but voting for you because of this reason? What would you say to them?
Well, I would hope that our voters are informed about the people they're voting into office and retaining into office. I would want to tell them the reasons why they should vote for me is because of my experience, because of my temperament, because of my track record. I think that in the legal community, I've built a reputation as being hardworking and concerned for doing what is right, ensuring that due process is met, and that the Constitution is upheld. And I think that when you're talking about a judge, those are the kinds of qualities that you want. So if that's what you want in a judge, then you should vote for me. If that's not, then I certainly can't, do anything about that. And so.
Thank you.
Well, first off, Judge, thanks for spending some of your Saturday with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Excuse me. One of the interesting dynamics to this state with electing judges. Now, we know that unless I ask you specifically what your party affiliation is, it's a nonpartisan race, so you're not going to put that out there. Being as somebody, though, that has been involved in inter-party politics at some level since about 2008, I know firsthand that when you go to specific meetings, whichever party it may be, typically you will have a list of judges put out by either the county party, the state party, of judges that they recommend you to vote for based on their ideology. Based on that, if I were to go and look up the Democrat Party, the Republican Party, the Independent American Party, or any of the other parties out there, which party would have your name on it?
I would hope that all would.
Okay.
Because I mean, I've gone to events for both parties, and I can say that I've been well received by both. And so, you know, I think if you're talking about someone who's the most qualified candidate, no matter what your party, I would think that you would want to vote for that person.
Okay, fair enough. The reason for the question is because lots of people don't inform themselves when it comes to judges, and basically they just say, okay, well, I'm a Republican, Republicans say vote for this judge, and vice versa. So thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Anthony?
Judge Yeager, you've been on the bench almost a year now. Can you give us a synopsis? You identified two programs you want to increase the Veterans Court for Justice Court. You talked about the Las Vegas Community Courts. You see other programs now that you've been on the bench for almost a year that could benefit the justice system in the Justice Court?
Well, there is something that I'm also on. There's a committee for evidence-based pretrial that Justice Hardesty has put together. It has to do with decisions about releasing defendants. Right now, we get a limited amount of information before we make those decisions. Obviously, both the defense attorney and the state get to argue. What the nation has really gone towards more is using evidence-based practices, and that's what this committee is about. So instead of just using kind of what you think may be the right decision, there's actually statistical significance through, there's an assessment tool that's done. So what has happened in other jurisdictions like Kentucky and Denver, and gosh, they're Washington DC, what they have done is they figured out the answers to these sorts of questions will give statistical significance to whether or not that person will remain safe if they're out in the community on their own recognizance, and also whether or not they'll return to court. So that way, when we're given that information, there's actually a science behind it. So that's one thing that I know that Justice Hardesty is having our state move to, and that's something that I'm a part of.
Thank you for coming. Thanks for coming. Robert Law. One of the concerns I have in dealing with a lot of justice court judges in real estate and so forth in business is I find a lot of the judges seem to want to do what's fair and not what's right, not what's legal, what the law requires. And I want to try to bend over backwards and be fair in their mind, what they think is fair rather than what the law says. And for example, you're mentioning helping people who have financial issues and stresses issues that are causing them to be evicted.
Right?
There's another side of that, and property owners have to pay mortgages for a couple of months. They have to pay thousands in repairs and cleanup and attorney's fees, so they're losing thousands of dollars. So law normally requires the tenant to put up the rent or leave.
Absolutely, and
I've
maybe.
seen a very broad response from judges, and it's very unpredictable, to be honest.
So let me be more specific about what maybe you misunderstood what I'm saying. I rule according to the law. If the tenant has not paid their rent, then they're in unlawful, and they don't have a habitability issue where they've posted the rent with the court or anything like that, then they're in unlawful detainer, and I grant the eviction. The hard part is that, I know from an emotional standpoint that they've fallen on hard times. After I evict them, I would like to be able to refer them to other services. So I can tell you that I rule according to the statute when it comes to landlord-tenant. If it's a habitability issue, I make the tenant show that they have done written notice and that they've posted that withheld rent with the court. And any other issues, when we're talking about habitability, I actually have a drawer where I have you know, the habitability statute and, you know, and I tell them under NRS 40.255 and Rule 44 of the Las Vegas Justice Court rule, you have to post the withheld rent with the court before you can pursue defense of habitability, and I give it to them so they know. And so I do rule according to the statute, and I can say if you ask any of the managers or people that appear before me on a regular basis, they will tell you the same.
Hi, my name is Monty Levy. I actually appear as a supporter on your list, so I've been instructed I have to abstain from voting in your race, but I am permitted to ask a question. There is a caveat to my name being on your support list. As you're aware, when you were appointed by the county commission, I was actually present for that appointment, and I was actually sitting with and supporting one of your opponents. So it actually means something that I put my name behind someone.
Thank you.
My question to you is, you were talking about the blue sheets and how you implemented adding additional information, including adding whether or not the individual that you may be appointed to as the public defender was a veteran or was honorably discharged. Now, I know right now you have a civil docket, but you sometimes sit in for other criminal judges that have actually appeared in front of you. Under NRS 4.374, subsection 1, that provides that before accepting a plea from a defendant or proceeding to trial, the justice of the peace shall address the defendant personally and ask the defendant if he or she is a veteran or a member of the military. Do you believe that just having it on the blue sheet complies strictly with what that statute provides? And if not, when given a criminal calendar, how will you make sure that your policies in your courtroom comply with NRS 4.374?
Well, if they are appointed a public defender, I would hope that the public defender would speak up. But if they don't, I think that it would be wise for me to, before I start, ask, because there's also other collateral consequences for other issues such as immigration, but ask the courtroom that if they are a veteran or if they are not a U.S. citizen, that they talk to their attorney about that first, and that way that the attorney can inform me, because I don't want it to get into confidential communications, but I guess
Right, I understand, but the statute specifically says that the judge shall discuss this with the defendant directly. It says, quote, before accepting a plea from a defendant or proceeding to trial, the justice of the peace shall address the defendant personally and ask the defendant if he or she is a veteran.
Well, then I guess what I really should do is, before I take a plea, ask them, are you a veteran? And I think that would be a very simple thing to have in my practice.
There's more that goes on to that statute, but that's just the beginning part of it, because then there's a requirement of the justices from there. So I just ask you to read that before.
I will. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Jason Smith. I'm the Vice Chair of the Libertarian Party of Nevada. And I know when you spoke earlier about both parties accepting you, I'm sure you were talking about us and one of the other ones, so I'll let that one go. Anyhow, in 2016, on the ballot this year, there will be a referendum to decriminalize cannabis, marijuana. If that happens, it is going to throw a lot of legal curveballs regarding driving, regarding child protective services. I mean, it's going to cover quite a few arenas. What are your thoughts about that, and how will the justice of the peace and judges have to adjust their attitudes towards it, as well as their rulings?
Well, I mean, I guess if you're talking about criminal matters that would come before us, even though if cannabis was legalized, that still doesn't change the DUI laws. I mean, there are laws in place right now regarding driving under the influence and
Right, but there's no way to test for impairment on cannabis. They can test the nanograms, but they can't tie that to impairment because it stays in your system long enough where it might still be there the next day.
well, it's actually for 30 days. But that's something that I have to rely on the legislators as far as, you know, if they have made a per se rule as far as what it is, that's something that is up to the legislature. I just have to uphold the law and rule according to the law. And I understand that there may be other issues on the civil side if you're talking about employment law and some other different kind of murky waters, and I would probably want to know more before I make any decisions regarding that on civil matters.
This time we did make a sweep around the panel, however, we still have about 7-8 minutes. So do we have any other questions for Judge Yeager?
I'll ask a question. Good afternoon, my name is Karen Stillman. I'm the Auxiliary Director with Veterans in Politics. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
One of the things that I hear often from anybody who's ever been involved in court proceedings or attorneys or judges or the law is that it doesn't matter if they win or lose, that there's always a sense of not having had justice. Could you speak to that and tell us what you would do to ensure that justice is served for everybody involved?
Well, I can tell you actually from personal experience a couple of things that have happened. You know, I made it a point to make sure that everyone who comes before me, whether I rule against them or not, feels like they had the opportunity to be heard. And I get a lot of pro se litigants that come in before me, so when I'm making a decision, I explain the legal reasoning behind that decision, so that way they know why I'm making that decision that way. About 3 weeks ago, I was at a Lowe's, and the lady that was checking me out said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a judge." She said, "I knew it!" And, you know, and I was thinking, uh-oh. And she said, "You know what? It was, you evicted me, but you were fair. I knew you were ruling just according to the law. You explained why you did it, and I really appreciate that. You told me that I could go across the way to the Civil Law Self-Help Center for a motion to stay, and you directed me exactly what I needed to do from a legal standpoint, and you know what? I really appreciate that you did that." And then she said, "I can't wait to tell my husband. He's not going to believe it." And, you know, that was very humbling to me because it really brings to light that my decisions affect regular people. But it was also a testament that I was doing something right. Because if someone who I rule against can still talk to me and shake my hand and say, "Thank you for being fair," then I think I'm doing something right.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, take it out of the
Thank you
box.
so much.